The smell of lemon-scented furniture polish clung to my skin like a second coat as I worked my way through the vast living room of the Blackwood estate. Early morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across Italian marble floors that I'd spent the previous hour polishing to a mirror shine. My shoulders ached, but I couldn't afford to slow down. Not in this house. Not when he could return at any moment. 6 months I'd been working here, invisible to everyone except when they needed something. 6 months of keeping my head down, my voice soft, my existence minimal. 6 months of pretending I didn't recognize the man who owned these walls. I wiped the sweat from my brow with the back of my hand and tried to ignore the framed photographs lining the mantelpiece. They told the story of a powerful man's rise. Charity galas, political handshakes, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, a carefully crafted public image that hid what everyone in this city whispered about behind closed doors. Dominic Blackwood wasn't just a successful businessman. He was something else entirely. "Mama, look what I found." My heart leaped at the sound of my daughter's voice. I watched Amelia come bounding into the room, her dark curls bouncing with each step, her eyes, his eyes, wide with childish wonder. At 4 years old, she was the spitting image of her father, though he had no idea she existed. That's how I wanted to keep it. That's why I'd run 5 years ago, before I'd even begun to show. That's why, when desperation had driven me back to this city 6 months ago, I'd used my mother's maiden name to apply for this job. "Sweetie, I told you to stay in the playroom," I said, kneeling down to her level. Mrs. Reynolds, the head housekeeper, had taken pity on me when she'd learned I was a single mother and allowed Amelia to stay in the staff quarters playroom on days when my babysitter canceled. Today was one of those days. "Mr. Blackwood is coming home today." "Is he the man in all the pictures?" she asked, pointing to the mantelpiece I'd been studiously avoiding. "Yes," I whispered, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm June air filtering through the open terrace doors. "But he's very busy and important, so we need to stay out of his way." The sound of tires on gravel made my blood freeze. I grabbed Amelia's hand and hurried toward the service corridor, but her little shoelace had come undone. As she bent to fix it, a small stuffed rabbit, the one she must have been coming to show me, tumbled from her grasp and rolled across the gleaming floor, coming to rest directly in the path from the front door to the main staircase. "Hurry, Amelia," I urged, my voice tight with panic. But it was too late. The massive front door swung open, and the air in the room changed instantly, like the drop in barometric pressure before a devastating storm. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor as heavy footsteps entered, followed by the lighter steps of what I knew would be his security detail. One set of footsteps stopped. I didn't need to look up to know he'd spotted Amelia's toy. "Sir, about the meeting," a man's voice began. "Later," came the reply. That same deep voice that had haunted my dreams for 5 years, the voice that had once whispered promises against my skin, before I'd learned what those promises really meant. I dared to glance up just as Dominic Blackwood, impeccable in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, bent to pick up the rabbit. His dark hair was shorter than I remembered, silver now touching the temples, but everything else was the same: the broad shoulders, the strong jaw, the aura of barely contained power that seemed to electrify the air around him. "I wasn't aware we had children in the house," he said to no one in particular, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on us. Amelia clutching my hand, me trying desperately to become invisible. For a moment, I thought we'd escape notice. His gaze passed over me, just another member of the household staff, and moved to Amelia. Then, like a compass finding north, his eyes snapped back to my face. I watched as his expression shifted from casual indifference to stunned recognition. 5 years had changed me, the soft curves of youth hardened by struggle, designer clothes replaced by a simple uniform, carefree smile erased by the daily fight to provide for my daughter. Our daughter. But not enough to hide who I once was. "Sophie?" The name fell from his lips like a question, a prayer, and an accusation all at once. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tightened my grip on Amelia's hand. "Mr. Blackwood," I replied, my voice mechanical, my eyes now fixed on his Italian leather shoes. "Everyone out," he ordered, his voice deceptively calm. His security team hesitated. "Sir." "Now," The single word carried such authority that the men immediately retreated, closing the massive front door behind them. Even Mrs. Reynolds, who'd appeared at the commotion, melted away without a word. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel his eyes on me, cataloging every detail, every change, every lie told by my presence in his home. "Mama, who is that man?" Amelia's voice was small but curious, tugging at my hand as she peered up at the stranger who was her father. I watched Dominic's gaze drop to Amelia, and I saw multiple emotions cross his face too quickly to identify. But the way his eyes widened fractionally as he took in her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, the dimple in her left cheek that matched his own, told me he was putting the pieces together. "How old is she?" he asked quietly, still staring at Amelia. "4," I replied, my voice barely audible. "Her name is Amelia." His jaw tightened, and the hand holding the stuffed rabbit clenched momentarily before he regained control. He crouched down to Amelia's eye level, his movements slow and deliberate, as if approaching a skittish animal. "Hello, Amelia. This must be yours." He held out the toy. She nodded, suddenly shy, pressing against my leg but reaching for her rabbit. "Thank you," she whispered. When their fingers briefly touched during the exchange, I felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Their first contact, father and daughter. A moment I'd both dreaded and, in my weakest hours, longed for. "Sophie, my office, now." The gentle tone he'd used with Amelia vanished, replaced by cold command. He straightened, buttoning his jacket in a smooth motion that emphasized the vast difference between our current stations in life. "Mrs. Reynolds can watch Amelia." As if summoned by her name, the head housekeeper reappeared. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Come along, dear," she said, holding out her hand to Amelia. My daughter looked up at me, uncertain. "It's okay, sweetie. I'll be back soon," I assured her, though I wasn't certain of anything anymore. With visible reluctance, she took Mrs. Reynolds's hand, casting curious glances back at Dominic as she was led away. The moment we were alone, Dominic turned away without a word, striding toward his office with the expectation that I would follow. And I did. Because what choice did I have? The click of the door shutting behind us sounded like a prison cell locking. His office was exactly as I remembered from my one brief glimpse years ago. Dark wood, leather-bound books, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens, and a massive desk that served as both workspace and reminder of the power imbalance between us. He didn't sit. Instead, he poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, his back to me, the rigid set of his shoulders speaking volumes. I remained standing just inside the door, hands clasped tightly before me, wondering if I could reach the handle before he could stop me, wondering if I should grab Amelia and run. Again, when he finally turned to face me, his expression was carefully controlled. But his eyes, those deep blue eyes that Amelia had inherited, burned with an intensity that made me shiver. 5 years, he said, each word precisely measured. 5 years, Sophie. You disappear without a trace, and now you show up in my house as my housekeeper? A bitter laugh escaped him. With my child? I needed a job, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. I didn't know you'd be here. Your travel schedule? Don't, he cut me off. Don't insult my intelligence. You knew exactly who owned this house. I swallowed hard. I needed the money, and this was the best paying position I could find with my limited resume. I never intended for you to see us. That much is obvious. He took a measured sip of his drink. Were you ever going to tell me I had a daughter? The question hung in the air between us like a live wire. I thought of all the reasons I'd run. The night I'd accidentally seen the real nature of his business, the bloodied man in his warehouse, the casual way Dominic had ordered punishments, the cold efficiency with which his orders were carried out, the fear that had driven me to flee the moment I realized I was carrying his child. No, I admitted. I wasn't. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He set his glass down with deliberate care. You stole 4 years of her life from me. I protected her, I countered, finding a courage I didn't know I possessed. From what? From me? He moved toward me then, each step measured and predatory. From the father who would have given her everything, who would have made sure she wanted for nothing. From your world, I said, forcing myself to stand my ground even as he approached. From what you do, from what you are. He stopped inches from me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. The same one he'd worn 5 years ago, mixed with the scent that was uniquely him. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. And what am I, Sophie? His voice had dropped to a near whisper. You know what you are, I replied, my heart pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. I saw enough that night at the warehouse. I know what happens to people who cross you. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but his expression remained unreadable. Yet here you are, in my home. The one person who's crossed me more than anyone. Fear bloomed in my chest, but I thought of Amelia and stood taller. If you're going to threaten me, threaten you? He looked almost offended. You're the mother of my child. A child you just learned about 5 minutes ago. His hand shot out, not to strike me as I'd instinctively feared, but to grasp my chin, tilting my face up to his. His touch was gentle but unyielding. A child you hid from me for years, he corrected, his eyes searching mine. My daughter, Sophie, mine. The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver down my spine, not entirely from fear, and that terrified me more than any threat could have. What are you going to do? I asked, barely able to get the words out. His thumb brushed across my lower lip in a gesture so intimate it stole my breath. First, I'm going to get to know my daughter, he said softly. And then, Sophie, then we're going to discuss exactly how you're going to make up for the time you've stolen from us. He released me and stepped back, his expression shifting to something more businesslike, though the intensity remained. You'll move out of the staff quarters today, both of you. There are suitable rooms in the family wing. I'm not quitting my job, I said, desperate to maintain some semblance of control. We're not moving in with you. His smile was slow and predatory. You already live here, Sophie, but from now on you'll do so as the mother of my child, not as someone who cleans my floors. He returned to his desk, picking up his phone. I'll have your things moved while we have lunch. I haven't agreed to anything, I protested. He looked up, and the expression on his face made it clear that my agreement was irrelevant. You've kept my daughter from me for 4 years. Consider this me being generous. His tone softened slightly. She seems well cared for, happy. She is, I said, a mother's pride momentarily overriding my fear. Good. He nodded once. That's the only reason I'm being civilized about this, Sophie. Don't mistake it for forgiveness. As I stood there, caught between the door and the man I'd fled from years ago, I realized I'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. I'd gambled that Dominic Blackwood would never notice one more housekeeper in his massive estate. I'd lost, and now I was trapped, caught in the web of a man who collected debts with interest, who never forgot a betrayal, and who had just discovered the existence of an heir. What terrified me most wasn't the anger simmering beneath his controlled exterior. It was the look in his eyes when he'd first seen Amelia. A look of wonder, possession, and absolute determination. Dominic Blackwood had found something he considered his, and I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that he would never let either of us go again. I followed Dominic through the winding corridors of the mansion, my mind racing. The lunch he'd invited me to wasn't an invitation at all, but a command performance. When we reached the sunroom, I found Amelia already there, perched on a cushioned window seat surrounded by coloring books and crayons that hadn't been there earlier. Mrs. Reynolds stood nearby, her usually stern face softened as she watched my daughter. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds, Dominic said, dismissing her with a nod. That will be all for now. The older woman hesitated, glancing between Dominic and me with undisguised curiosity before departing with a curt, "Yes, sir." "Mama?" Amelia looked up with a bright smile that faltered slightly when she noticed Dominic. "Look what Mrs. Reynolds gave me." She held up a coloring book featuring elaborate princess castles. "That's lovely, sweetie," I said, moving to her side instinctively, placing myself between her and Dominic. A futile gesture, I knew, but maternal instinct overrode logic. "Do you like princesses, Amelia?" Dominic asked, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. She nodded shyly. I like the ones that fight dragons. Something that might have been a smile touched his lips. A warrior princess. I approve. He gestured toward the table where an elaborate lunch had been set. Are you hungry? The chef has prepared something special. Amelia looked to me for permission, and I nodded, helping her down from the window seat. As she skipped to the table, I felt Dominic's presence at my shoulder. She has your smile, he murmured, so only I could hear. And your stubbornness, I suspect. She has your eyes, I replied, before I could stop myself. And your dimple. The acknowledgement seemed to please him. His hand brushed the small of my back as he guided me to the table, a possessive gesture that sent unwanted warmth through me. I jerked away, earning a narrowed glance from him, but he said nothing as we joined Amelia. Lunch was surreal. Dominic asked Amelia questions about her favorite colors, animals, stories, building a mental catalog of the daughter he'd just discovered. I watched him transform before my eyes from the ruthless man I knew into a father trying to make a connection. It was disconcerting how natural he seemed, how quickly Amelia warmed to him. Mr. Blackwood has a pool, Mama, Amelia informed me excitedly between bites of her grilled cheese sandwich, cut into perfect triangles. Can I swim in it someday? Before I could answer, Dominic said, Of course you can, Princess, anytime you want. He turned to me. Does she know how to swim? No, I admitted. Lessons weren't in our budget. Something flashed in his eyes, anger, but not directed at me. That will change immediately. I'll arrange for an instructor. Dominic. It's decided, Sophie. The firmness in his voice brooked no argument. He turned back to Amelia with a softer expression. Would you like that? To learn to swim? Her enthusiastic nod made him smile. A genuine smile that transformed his features, making him look younger, more like the man I'd fallen for years ago, before I'd known what lay beneath the charming exterior. After lunch, Dominic's assistant appeared at the doorway. Sir, your 2 o'clock is waiting. He nodded, rising from his seat. Tell them I'll be there shortly. To me, he said, Take the afternoon to get settled in your new rooms. Marco will show you the way when you're ready. I opened my mouth to protest again, but he silenced me with a look. Not in front of Amelia, he warned quietly. Then, to my daughter, he crouched down and said, I have to go to a meeting now, but I'll see you at dinner, okay? Okay, Mr. Blackwood, she replied, surprising me with a small wave goodbye. You can call me Dom, if you like, he told her with a wink, before straightening and fixing me with a pointed look. We'll talk later. The threat, or promise, hung in the air as he left. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. I like him, Mama, Amelia said, returning to her coloring book. He's nice. I swallowed hard. He can seem that way, I murmured, more to myself than to her. Marco, who turned out to be one of Dominic's security team, appeared an hour later to escort us to our new accommodations. I'd spent that hour trying to figure out my next move, but every scenario ended the same way, with Dominic finding us. Now that he knew about Amelia, he would never stop looking. Our new rooms turned out to be an entire wing of the mansion. A master suite for me connected to a fairy tale bedroom for Amelia, complete with a canopy bed, a reading nook, and shelves already stocked with children's books and toys. When did he have time to arrange all this? I asked Marco, stunned by the transformation of what had clearly been guest rooms. The security man's face remained impassive. Mr. Blackwood is efficient when he wants something done. That was putting it mildly. The speed with which he'd claimed us was frightening. After Marco left, I explored our gilded cage. My suite was tastefully decorated in cream and blue, my favorite colors, I realized with a chill. Had that been coincidence, or did he remember such a detail after all these years? The walk-in closet was empty except for my meager belongings, which looked pathetic hanging in the vast space. I checked the windows, electronically controlled, with a security system I couldn't begin to understand. The doors all opened, but I had no illusions about our freedom. Dominic might not have locked us in, but I knew we were prisoners nonetheless. When I returned to Amelia's room, I found her bouncing on the bed, her face alight with excitement. Mama, look, it's just like a princess bed. I forced a smile. It's beautiful, sweetie, but remember, we might not be staying here long. Her face fell. But I like it here. And Mr. Dom said we could stay. Amelia, I began carefully, sitting on the edge of the bed. We need to talk about Mr. Blackwood. Is he your friend? She asked innocently. He looks at you like you're a princess in a story. My heart clenched. Even at 4, she was perceptive. We knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. Was he your prince? I closed my eyes briefly. No, sweetheart. Real life isn't like fairy tales. I took her small hands in mine. Mr. Blackwood he's your father, Amelia. Her eyes widened. Like the daddies other kids at playgroup have? Yes, I said softly. But he didn't know about you until today. That's why he seems so interested. She processed this with a child's simplicity. Is that why we're staying in his castle now? Because he's my daddy? Something like that. I brushed her dark curls from her forehead. But I don't want you to get too attached, okay? We might have to leave. Why? Her brow furrowed in confusion. Don't you like him? The question caught me off guard. Did I like Dominic Blackwood? Once. I had more than liked him. I had loved him with the reckless abandon of a 22-year-old who believed in happy endings. Before I'd discovered who he really was, what he was capable of. It's complicated, sweetheart, I said finally. Grown-up things usually are. She accepted this with a nod, though I could tell she didn't understand. How could she? I barely understood the situation myself. After helping Amelia unpack her few belongings, I left her playing with her new toys and retreated to my suite to think. I needed a plan, but every option seemed impossible. If we ran, Dominic would find us. If we stayed, we'd be at his mercy, living under his roof, beholden to him for everything from food to clothing, to the roof over our heads. I was contemplating these bleak choices when a soft knock came at my door. I opened it to find a young woman with a tape measure and fabric swatches. Ms. Carter, I'm Helena, Mr. Blackwood's personal shopper. He asked me to help you with a new wardrobe. I stared at her in disbelief. I don't need a new wardrobe. Her professional smile didn't waver. Mr. Blackwood was quite insistent, for both you and your daughter. I bet he was, I muttered, but reluctantly stepped aside to let her in. Arguing with Dominic's employees would get me nowhere. Helena worked efficiently, measuring me while making polite conversation. When she was done, she handed me a tablet. These are some preliminary selections based on Mr. Blackwood's guidelines. If you'd like to choose the styles you prefer, I can have the first items delivered tomorrow. I scrolled through the tablet, my jaw dropping at the designer names and exorbitant prices. This is ridiculous. I can't accept all this. Mr. Blackwood mentioned you might say that. Helena's smile turned sympathetic. He also said to remind you that appearances matter in his world, and as the mother of his child, you'll be expected to attend certain functions with him. Cold dread settled in my stomach. What functions? I believe he intends to discuss that with you himself. She glanced at her watch. Speaking of which, he asked me to remind you that dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. Mrs. Reynolds will come for Amelia at 6:30. Mr. Blackwood has arranged for her to eat earlier in the kitchen. He wants to have dinner alone with me? The thought made my pulse quicken. With fear or anticipation, I couldn't tell. Both, perhaps. Yes, ma'am. Will you need help getting ready? I shook my head, fighting back hysterical laughter. From housekeeper to... What? What exactly did Dominic expect me to be now? After Helena left, I paced the room, my anxiety mounting. At 6, I ran a bath for Amelia, trying to maintain some semblance of our normal routine in this abnormal situation. By 6:30, she was dressed in her cleanest outfit, a simple blue dress that now seemed woefully inadequate amid the luxury surrounding us. Mrs. Reynolds arrived precisely on time. Good evening, Ms. Carter. Miss Amelia? She smiled warmly at my daughter. Cook has made spaghetti and meatballs for the children's dinner tonight. Children? Amelia perked up. There are other kids? Mr. Blackwood's niece and nephew are visiting. They're a bit older than you, 6 and 8, but I'm sure you'll get along splendidly. This was news to me. Dominic has siblings? Mrs. Reynolds gave me a curious look. Just one. His sister, Mrs. Elena Ricci. She and her husband are attending a charity event with their eldest tonight, but the younger children stayed behind. I nodded, filing away this information. In the 5 months we dated years ago, Dominic had rarely mentioned his family. There was so much I didn't know about him, despite having carried his child. After Amelia left with Mrs. Reynolds, I showered and stared at my pitiful wardrobe options. I finally settled on my one decent dress, a simple black sheath I'd bought secondhand for job interviews. It was hopelessly plain, but at least it was clean and relatively unwrinkled. At 5 minutes to 7, I made my way to the main dining room, my heart pounding with each step. 2 of Dominic's security team stood in the hallway outside, nodding respectfully as I approached. The implied message was clear. I might be receiving preferential treatment, but I was still being watched. Dominic was already waiting, standing by one of the tall windows with a glass of wine in hand. He'd changed into a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms and dark trousers. The casual elegance of his appearance made my simple dress feel even more inadequate. He turned as I entered, his eyes moving over me in a slow, deliberate assessment that made heat rise to my cheeks. "Sophie," he said, his voice low, "you look lovely." "Don't patronize me," I replied, remaining by the door. "We both know I'm underdressed for whatever this is." A slight smile curved his lips. "You misunderstand. The dress is forgettable. You are lovely." He crossed to a side table where a bottle of wine was chilling and poured a second glass. "Helena mentioned you were resistant to the wardrobe I arranged. I don't need your charity." "It isn't charity." He approached, offering me the wine. When I didn't take it, he set it on the table near me. "It's practical. You're no longer a housekeeper, Sophie. You're the mother of my child. Your appearance reflects on both of us, and on Amelia." "Is that what this dinner is about? Laying out your rules?" I gestured to the elaborate table setting. Crystal glittered under the chandelier's light, and fresh flowers perfumed the air. "Explaining how I'm supposed to behave now that you've decided to acknowledge us?" His expression hardened. "You're angry. I understand that. But let's be clear about who created this situation." He gestured for me to take a seat, and after a moment's hesitation, I did. He took the chair at the head of the table, close to mine rather than at the opposite end. "You could have told me you were pregnant. You chose to run instead." "I had my reasons," I said, finally reaching for the wine. "I needed something to steady my nerves." "Yes, you mentioned the warehouse." His tone was dangerously calm. "What exactly did you see that night, Sophie?" I met his gaze directly, enough to know what kind of man you really are. He leaned forward slightly. "And what kind is that?" "The kind who has men beaten until they're unrecognizable. The kind who gives orders and watches while others do his dirty work." I gripped the stem of my wine glass tightly. "The kind who lives by a different set of rules than the rest of us. You're not wrong," he admitted after a pause, surprising me with his candor. "But you're not entirely right either." A uniformed server appeared, bringing the first course, an artfully arranged salad I had no appetite for. We remained silent until he departed. "The man you saw that night," Dominic continued once we were alone, "had trafficked young women, girls as young as 14, brought into the country with promises of modeling careers, then sold to the highest bidders." His voice remained steady, but I could see the cold fury in his eyes. He got exactly what he deserved. I stared at him, caught off guard by this justification. "So you're what? Some kind of vigilante? Taking out bad guys the law can't touch?" A humorless smile touched his lips. "Hardly. I'm a businessman with certain ethical boundaries. Lines I won't cross, lines I punish others for crossing." "And that makes everything okay? You decide who deserves punishment, and that gives you the right to deliver it?" "I didn't say it makes it okay. I said it's what happened." He took a sip of wine, his eyes never leaving mine. "Would it have made a difference if you'd known why that man was being punished?" I considered the question honestly. "Maybe. I don't know. I was 22, Dominic. I'd never seen violence like that before. And now? Now I'm a mother. My priorities have changed." I set my glass down carefully, which brings us to why we're here. "What exactly do you expect from me?" "From us?" The server returned with the main course. Steak for Dominic, sea bass for me. I wondered idly if he remembered my preference for fish, or if it had been a lucky guess. "What I expect," he said after the server departed again, "is for my daughter to grow up knowing her father. For her to have every advantage, every opportunity I can provide. and for her mother to be treated with the respect she deserves as the woman who gave me a child. And if that's not what I want, if I want to leave, his expression darkened. You won't take my daughter from me again, Sophie. That's non-negotiable. She doesn't know you, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. I'm all she's ever had. Because you chose that for her, he countered, his tone sharpening. But I'm not a monster. I'm not going to separate you. Amelia needs her mother. His eyes met mine, intense and uncompromising. Which means you stay too. As what? Your prisoner? Your what exactly? The word mistress hung unspoken between us. He set his fork down with deliberate care. As Amelia's mother. As to our personal relationship, that depends entirely on you. There is no personal relationship, I said quickly, too quickly. Something like amusement flickered across his face. We have a child together, Sophie. That's about as personal as it gets. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. But if you're referring to other aspects, I won't force anything on you. I never have. That much, at least, was true. Whatever else Dominic had been, he had never pressured me physically during our relationship. If anything, he'd been remarkably patient, waiting until I was ready before taking things further. So what happens now? I asked, pushing my barely touched food away. Now, we find a way forward. For Amelia's sake. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine before I could pull away. I've missed 4 years of her life, Sophie. I don't intend to miss any more. The intensity in his voice, the genuine regret in his eyes, caught me off guard. This wasn't just about possession or control. He truly wanted to know his daughter. And what about your end business? I asked carefully. Will she be exposed to that side of your life? Never, he said immediately, with such conviction that I almost believed him. That part of my world will never touch her. Or you. I wanted to believe him. Part of me, the foolish part that had fallen for him 5 years ago, still wanted to trust his promises. But I knew better now. Your security watched me all afternoon, I pointed out. I'm sure they'll continue to do so. How is that keeping us separated from your world? They're there to protect you, not monitor you, he countered. You'd be surprised how many enemies I've made over the years, people who might use you or Amelia to get to me. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Is that supposed to reassure me? It's supposed to be honest. He stood, coming around to my side of the table. I tensed as he approached, but he merely pulled out my chair. Come, there's something I want to show you. Warily, I followed him from the dining room and through the mansion to a room I hadn't entered during my time as housekeeper, his private study. Unlike the formal office where he conducted business, this space felt more personal. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes ranging from classics to modern fiction. A large desk dominated one wall, while comfortable seating occupied the center of the room. Dominic crossed to the desk and unlocked a drawer, removing a slim folder which he handed to me. Open it, he said quietly. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Me, 5 years ago, laughing at something outside the frame. Me, stepping out of my apartment building. Me, shopping in a market. You had me followed, I whispered, horror and betrayal washing over me. After you disappeared? Yes. He didn't look apologetic. I thought you'd been taken. I thought someone had hurt you to get to me. I looked up at him in shock. You were worried about me? Of course I was. Frustration edged his voice. I loved you, Sophie. When you vanished without a word, I tore this city apart looking for you. The past tense wasn't lost on me. Loved, not love. For how long? I asked, unable to stop myself from flipping through the photos. 6 months, he replied, until my investigators tracked you to Chicago. By then you were... His jaw tightened. I saw the photos. You were pregnant. Visibly so. I froze, my fingers hovering over a picture of me in a coffee shop, my hand resting protectively over my swollen belly. You knew? You knew I was pregnant? I suspected it was mine, he said, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of anger. But I wasn't certain. You'd been gone almost 4 months when I found you. It could have been someone else's. The implication stung more than it should have. There was never anyone else. Something flashed in his eyes, satisfaction, perhaps. I considered confronting you then, demanding answers. He moved to the window, looking out at the darkened gardens. But you clearly didn't want to be found. You'd gone to considerable lengths to disappear. So you just let me go? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. He turned back to me, his expression unreadable. I let you think you were free, yes. But I never stopped watching over you, Sophie. Never. The revelation should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a confusing mix of anger and something else. Something I refused to acknowledge. These photos stopped when Amelia was about 2. The physical surveillance stopped, he corrected, but I still received regular reports. I knew when you moved back to the city 6 months ago. I knew when you applied for the position here. The folder slipped from my fingers, photographs scattering across the polished floor. You knew I was here? All this time? From the moment Mrs. Reynolds forwarded your application, he remained by the window, watching my reaction with those penetrating blue eyes. I approved your hiring personally. My mind reeled with the implications. You've been playing me. For 6 months, you've been watching my daughter grow, he finished, his voice softer now. Learning who she is from a distance. Learning who you've become. Why the charade? I demanded, anger rising through my shock. Why pretend you didn't know we were here? I wanted to see what you would do, he admitted, crossing the room to stand before me, whether you would tell me about Amelia on your own. So, today's discovery was all an act, I said bitterly. You weren't surprised at all. No, he conceded. But my reaction to seeing her, to seeing you, that was genuine. He crouched down, gathering the fallen photographs with careful hands. I had planned to confront you eventually, but I wanted to understand why you ran first. I wanted to know if you'd changed. And have I? The question escaped before I could stop it. He looked up, still kneeling before me. You're stronger now, more determined. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. Motherhood suits you, Sophie. I stepped back, needing distance from his proximity, from the intensity of his gaze. This doesn't change anything. You've been manipulating me from the start. I prefer to think of it as giving you enough rope to hang yourself. He stood, placing the gathered photographs on the desk. But yes, I orchestrated your employment here. I wanted you close, where I could protect you both. Protect or control? I challenged. His smile held no warmth. Is there a difference? The casual admission sent a chill through me. This was the real Dominic Blackwood, the man who arranged people's lives like pieces on a chessboard, who saw manipulation as strategy rather than deception. I want to see Amelia, I said suddenly, needing to escape this room, this conversation, the unsettling effect he still had on me. Of course. He gestured toward the door. I'll take you to her. We walked in tense silence through the mansion. As we passed a large window overlooking the back gardens, a flash of lightning illuminated the grounds, followed seconds later by a rumble of thunder. I hadn't even noticed the storm rolling in, too caught up in the storm brewing inside these walls. She's afraid of thunderstorms, I said, more to myself than to Dominic. He glanced at me sharply. I should know these things, he said, frustration evident in his voice. Her fears, her favorite foods, her first words. These are things a father should know. For the first time, I glimpsed what this situation might look like from his perspective, discovering he had a child he'd never known. Years of milestones missed, irretrievable. Her first word was moon, I found myself saying. She was obsessed with it when she was little, used to cry when clouds covered it up. Dominic absorbed this information like a man dying of thirst. What else? She's allergic to strawberries. Not dangerously, but she gets a rash. She loves dogs, but is afraid of birds. She started walking at 10 months and hasn't slowed down since. With each detail, his expression softened, the hard lines of anger giving way to something more vulnerable. It was disarming to see this side of him, the father hungry for knowledge about his child. Another crash of thunder, closer now, interrupted the moment. We quickened our pace, reaching the kitchen where Mrs. Reynolds had taken Amelia for dinner. Through the doorway, I could see my daughter sitting at the kitchen island with two other children, a boy and a girl, both with dark hair and olive skin that marked them as Mediterranean. "Uncle Dom," the boy called out when he spotted Dominic, "are you staying to watch the movie with us?" Dominic's entire demeanor changed as he entered the kitchen, his posture relaxing, his expression warming into a genuine smile. "Not tonight, Marco. I have some work to finish, but I see you've met Amelia." The boy nodded enthusiastically. "She's cool. She likes dragons too." Amelia beamed at this approval from an older child, but her smile faltered as thunder boomed again, rattling the windows. She slipped off her stool and ran to me, wrapping her arms around my legs. "It's okay, sweetie," I soothed, lifting her into my arms. "It's just a storm. It can't hurt you." "It's too loud," she whispered against my neck, her small body trembling slightly. Dominic watched us, a strange expression on his face. Longing, perhaps, or envy at the easy comfort between mother and daughter. "You know," he said, addressing Amelia directly, "this house has been around for over 100 years, and not once has it ever been damaged by a storm." He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Would you like to see something special, something that might make the thunder less scary?" Amelia peered at him cautiously from the safety of my arms. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Good girl," he said with an encouraging smile. "Let's get your friends too." The two other children eagerly jumped down from their stools, clearly used to following their uncle's lead. Mrs. Reynolds gave me a reassuring nod as we left the kitchen, Amelia still in my arms, the other children trailing behind Dominic like ducklings. He led us through corridors I hadn't explored during my time as housekeeper, up a winding staircase to what appeared to be a tower room. The circular space was dominated by windows on all sides, offering a panoramic view of the storm-lashed grounds. Rain pattered against the glass, and lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the roiling clouds. "This was my favorite place when I was a boy," Dominic said, flipping a switch that activated subtle lighting around the perimeter of the room. "My father used to bring me up here during storms. He said it was better to watch them than to hide from them." Amelia clung tighter to me as thunder rumbled again, but her fear was now mingled with curiosity. "It's so high up," she whispered. "The highest point of the house," Dominic confirmed. "The perfect place for storm watching." He gestured to a collection of cushions and throws, arranged on a circular bench that followed the curve of the windows. "Make yourselves comfortable." The other children needed no encouragement, immediately burrowing into the pillows with the familiarity of those who had done this before. After a moment's hesitation, I sat with Amelia on my lap, her back against my chest so she could see the spectacle outside. Dominic remained standing, his tall frame silhouetted against the stormy sky. "Watch for it," he told the children. "The lightning comes first, then you count until you hear the thunder. The higher the count, the further away the storm." On cue, a brilliant fork of lightning split the darkness. Dominic began counting aloud, joined by his niece and nephew. 1, 2, 3. They reached 7 before thunder rolled across the sky. 7 seconds, he explained. "That means the storm is about 7 miles away. Let's watch and see if it gets closer or moves away." For the next half hour, we sat in the tower room, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. Gradually, Amelia's fear receded, replaced by the scientific fascination of a 4-year-old. She slipped from my lap to join the other children at the windows, her face pressed to the glass despite my warnings to be careful. Dominic sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, but not touching. "My father did this for Elena and me during every storm," he said quietly, his eyes on the children. "It became a family tradition." "You never mentioned your family when we were together," I observed, equally quiet. A shadow crossed his face. "They were complicated topics. Still are." "Mrs. Reynolds mentioned your sister is married. Elena, right?" He nodded. "For 9 years now. Marco and Sophia are her children." His gaze softened as it fell on his niece and nephew. "She married a good man, a legitimate businessman." The emphasis on legitimate didn't escape me. "Does she know what you do?" "She knows enough to keep her distance from certain aspects of my life." He turned to look at me directly. "Much as you will." Before I could respond, Amelia came bounding back to us, her fear of the storm apparently forgotten. "Mama? Mama, did you see that big lightning? We only counted to 4 this time." "I saw it, sweetie," I assured her, brushing her wild curls back from her forehead. "The storm is getting closer. Uncle Dom?" The girl, Sophia, called from the window. "Can we have hot chocolate? You always make hot chocolate during storms." Dominic smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "Of course we can. Why don't you and Marco go down to the kitchen and ask Mrs. Reynolds to prepare it? We'll be right behind you." The 2 older children raced from the room, their footsteps echoing down the spiral staircase. Amelia looked torn, clearly wanting to follow her new friends but unwilling to leave my side. "You can go with them if you want," I told her. "Mrs. Reynolds will look after you." She hesitated, looking between me and Dominic. "Will you come too, Mama?" "In a minute, sweetheart. I need to talk to your father for a moment." The word felt strange on my tongue. Father. But Dominic's sharp intake of breath told me he'd noticed. Once Amelia had departed, trailing reluctantly after the older children, we were left alone in the tower room, the storm raging around us. "You're good with them," I said, breaking the silence. "The children." He shrugged, but I could tell the compliment pleased him. "Children are straightforward. They don't play games or hide their feelings. They just are." Unlike adults, the implication hung between us. "I need to know what happens next," I said, turning to face him fully. "You've orchestrated this whole situation, brought us into your home, declared yourself Amelia's father. What's the endgame, Dominic?" He considered me for a long moment, his face partially illuminated by a flash of lightning. "There is no endgame, Sophie. There's just life. Our life, together, raising our daughter." "You make it sound so simple." "It can be," he insisted, leaning forward. "You, me, Amelia, a family. I can give her everything, Sophie, everything I never had growing up. A stable home, the best education, opportunities most people can't even imagine." "And what about the other side of your life? The part that sent me running 5 years ago?" His expression hardened. "That part stays separate. I've built walls between my worlds for a reason." "Walls have a way of crumbling," I countered. "What happens when those worlds collide? When someone decides to use your daughter, your family, against you?" "That won't happen," he said with such cold certainty that I almost believed him. "You can't guarantee that. No one could." He moved closer, his knee brushing mine. "What I can guarantee is that anyone who tried would regret it deeply. I protect what's mine, Sophie. Always." The possessiveness in his tone should have repelled me. Instead, it sent a treacherous warmth through my veins. The primitive appeal of absolute protection, of belonging to someone powerful enough to keep danger at bay. "We're not yours," I said. But the protest sounded weak even to my own ears. His hand came up to touch my face, fingers tracing my jawline with surprising gentleness. "Aren't you?" I should have pulled away. I should have stood up, found Amelia, and what? Where could we go that he wouldn't find us? What life could I provide that would compare to the security he offered? The conflict must have shown on my face, because his expression softened. "I'm not asking for everything at once," he said, his voice low. "Just a chance to be Amelia's father. A chance for us to find our way back to something. Whatever that might be." Another brilliant flash of lightning, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The storm was directly overhead now, the rain lashing against the windows with renewed fury. "The eye of the storm," Dominic murmured, his gaze intense. "We're in it now, Sophie. The question is, do we weather it together or apart?" Before I could answer, the door burst open, and Amelia appeared, tears streaming down her face. "Mama!" she cried, launching herself into my arms. "The thunder is too loud!" I held her close, feeling her little heart racing against mine. "It's okay, baby. I've got you." Dominic rose, giving us space, but Amelia surprised me by reaching for him with one hand, keeping the other firmly wrapped in my blouse. "You too," she demanded through her tears. "You said storms can't hurt us in this house." A complex emotion crossed his face. Surprise, tenderness, and something deeper I couldn't name. Carefully, he crouched beside us, his large hand engulfing Amelia's tiny one. "That's right, princess," he said softly. "Nothing can hurt you here. Not while I'm around." His eyes met mine over our daughter's head, and I saw the unspoken promise there, not just to Amelia, but to me as well. Whether I wanted it or not, Dominic Blackwood had claimed us both, drawn us into his orbit with a gravitational pull I wasn't sure I had the strength to resist. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm leaving behind puddles that sparkled in the early sunlight. Amelia had insisted on sleeping in my room, her small body curled against mine like a comma, her breath warm against my neck. I'd lain awake for hours, my mind racing with thoughts of Dominic, of the revelations in his study, of the impossible situation we now found ourselves in. A soft knock at the bedroom door roused me from my fitful doze. I disentangled myself carefully from Amelia's sleeping form and padded across the plush carpet, tightening the belt of the silk robe I'd found hanging in the bathroom, another of Dominic's provisions. I opened the door to find not Dominic, as I'd expected, but a middle-aged woman I didn't recognize. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, her designer suit impeccable despite the early hour. "Ms. Carter?" she inquired with a slight accent I couldn't place. "I'm Elena Ricci, Dominic's sister." My breath caught. "I wasn't expecting visitors." Her smile was polite but assessing. "I imagine there are many things you weren't expecting when you took a position in my brother's household." She glanced past me to where Amelia slept peacefully in the massive bed. "May I come in? Or perhaps we could speak in the sitting room if you prefer." The subtle command in her tone reminded me forcefully of Dominic. Clearly, assertiveness ran in the family. "The sitting room would be better," I agreed, not wanting to risk waking Amelia. "Let me just—" "Of course. Take your time." Elena stepped back, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. I closed the door and moved to the closet, searching desperately for something appropriate to wear for this unexpected meeting. Among my pathetic collection of clothes hung several new items. Delivery from Dominic's personal shopper, no doubt. Under normal circumstances, I would have refused them on principle. But facing his sister in my threadbare t-shirt and leggings was unthinkable. I selected a simple cream blouse and navy slacks that looked the most conservative of the options, then slipped into the bathroom to change. When I emerged, I found Elena seated gracefully in one of the armchairs by the window, sunlight highlighting the similarities between her features and her brother's. The same high cheekbones, the same penetrating blue eyes. "You look remarkably like your brother," I observed, taking the seat across from her. "So I've been told," she replied, her gaze direct. "Dominic mentioned you knew each other before." 5 years ago, was it? I nodded, wondering exactly how much Dominic had shared with his sister. "We dated briefly. It ended abruptly. When you discovered you were pregnant with his child." Her tone made it a statement, not a question. "When I discovered certain things about his business interests," I corrected, unwilling to let her dictate the narrative. "The pregnancy came later. Something like respect flickered in her eyes." "I see. And now you've returned, with his daughter, to work as his housekeeper. An interesting choice." "I needed a job," I said simply. The position paid well, and I had limited options. And limited qualifications, I imagine. She leaned forward slightly. "Dominic tells me you were studying art history before you left the city. You never completed your degree." The reminder stung. I'd been 6 credits short of graduation when I discovered I was pregnant, forced to abandon my education when I fled. "No, I didn't." "A shame," Elena murmured. "Education opens so many doors." "Having a child to support closes just as many," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "But I've managed." She nodded, apparently satisfied with something in my response. "Yes, I can see that you have. My brother says your daughter is remarkable, intelligent, perceptive, well-adjusted despite your circumstances. Amelia doesn't know what she's missing," I said defensively. "Children don't need wealth to be happy. They need stability, love, attention. On that, we agree." Elena's expression softened slightly. "My own children have advantages many don't. but I've tried to ensure they understand that privilege comes with responsibility. Is that why you've come? To evaluate whether I've raised Dominic's daughter properly? A slight smile curved her lips. Partly, but mostly. I came to see for myself the woman who managed what no one else has. And what's that? I asked warily. Getting under my brother's skin, she replied with surprising candor. Dominic doesn't attach easily. Our upbringing saw to that. A shadow crossed her face. When you left, he was changed. Harder. More focused on business, less on personal connections. I absorbed this information with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. I find that hard to believe. We only dated for 5 months. Sometimes it's not about the duration, but the impact. She studied me thoughtfully. He's different now that you're back. There's a lightness to him I haven't seen in years. I'm not back, I corrected hastily. Not in the way you're implying. This is all Dominic's doing, finding me, bringing me here. I didn't choose this. Didn't you? She challenged. You chose to apply for a position in his home. You chose to bring his daughter into his sphere of influence. Perhaps not consciously, but choices were made. Her words hit with uncomfortable precision. Had some part of me wanted this? Wanted Dominic to find us, to take responsibility, to sweep into our lives with his resources and power? I pushed the thought away, unwilling to examine it too closely. What happens now is up to my brother, Elena continued when I didn't respond. But I thought you should know that whatever he decides, it will affect more than just the two of you. She glanced toward the bedroom door, where Amelia still slept. Children change everything. I'm sure you've discovered that already. Dominic doesn't get to decide our future, I said with more conviction than I felt. Amelia is my daughter. I've raised her alone for 4 years. And she'll always be your daughter. Elena agreed reasonably. But she's Dominic's too. In our family, blood means something. Her gaze sharpened. He won't let her go, Sophie. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone. Is that a threat? I asked quietly. Her laugh held genuine amusement. Not at all. It's a reality check. My brother is determined. When he wants something, he gets it. Always. She rose gracefully from her chair. But he's not unreasonable. Work with him, not against him, and you might find your new circumstances quite amenable. Before I could respond, another knock sounded at the door, more forceful this time. Elena's smile turned knowing. Speak of the devil. I opened the door to find Dominic, dressed impeccably in a tailored gray suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His expression darkened when he spotted his sister. Elena, he said, his voice deceptively mild. I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled this morning. We didn't, she replied smoothly. I thought I'd introduce myself to Sophie. Get to know the mother of my niece. The tension between the siblings was palpable. Respect mingled with long-standing power dynamics I couldn't begin to unravel. And have you? Dominic asked, his eyes never leaving his sister's face. Gotten to know her? We've had a lovely chat. Elena moved toward the door, pausing to kiss her brother's cheek. She's exactly as you described, stubborn, principled, protective. She glanced back at me with that assessing gaze. I think she'll do nicely. With that cryptic pronouncement, she departed, leaving me alone with Dominic in the sitting room. He closed the door behind her, his expression unreadable. I apologize for my sister, he said after a moment. She can be intrusive. She's protective of you, I observed. She wanted to see if I was a threat. A faint smile curved his lips. And are you? Not in the way she thinks. I crossed my arms, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I felt in these new clothes, in this room he'd provided, in this house he controlled. But I won't be a pawn in whatever game you're playing, Dominic. No game, he assured me, moving closer. Just breakfast. I thought we could take Amelia to the garden terrace. It's beautiful after a storm. The mundane suggestion caught me off guard. Breakfast? Yes, Sophie. The meal traditionally consumed in the morning. His smile widened. I thought we could start small, build some normalcy. Normalcy. As if anything about this situation could ever be normal. And yet, the simple domesticity of his suggestion was appealing. A chance for Amelia to spend time with her father in a relaxed setting, away from the intensity of the previous day's revelations. "She's still sleeping," I said, gesturing toward the bedroom. "No rush. The day is ours." He glanced around the sitting room, noting the untouched coffee service that had been delivered earlier. "You haven't eaten either." I wasn't hungry. In truth, anxiety had robbed me of my appetite. Concern flashed across his face. "You need to eat, Sophie." "I don't need you to tell me what I need," I snapped, the accumulated stress of the situation finally breaking through my careful control. "You don't get to disappear from my life for 5 years and then waltz back in giving orders." "I didn't disappear," he corrected, his voice hardening. "You ran. There's a difference, because I saw what you really are. You saw one moment, one night. You made assumptions about my entire life, my entire character, based on a fraction of the truth." "Was what I saw untrue?" I challenged. "Was that man not being beaten on your orders?" "The orders were mine," Dominic acknowledged without hesitation. "The reason behind them is what you failed to understand." "You keep saying that, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change what you are." His jaw tightened. "And what am I, Sophie? Say it. What exactly do you think I am?" The word hung between us, unspoken. "Mafia. Gangster. Criminal. You're dangerous," I said finally. "To anyone who crosses you." Something flashed in his eyes, hurt perhaps beneath the anger. "Is that why you ran? Because you were afraid of me? Afraid I would hurt you?" "Not me," I whispered. "I was afraid for our child, afraid of the life she'd have, growing up in your world." He moved suddenly, closing the distance between us in 2 swift strides. I flinched instinctively, and he froze, pain replacing anger in his expression. "You really believe I would hurt you?" he said flatly, stepping back. "After everything we shared, I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted. "The man I thought I knew 5 years ago wouldn't have had someone beaten half to death. The man who arranged for me to be hired as his housekeeper so he could watch me without my knowledge isn't someone I recognize either. People change, Sophie. Circumstances change us." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration I remembered from our time together. Finding out the woman I loved had disappeared with my child, that changed me. The past tense again. Loved. Not love. It shouldn't have hurt after all this time. But it did. "Mama?" Amelia's sleepy voice came from the bedroom doorway. She stood rubbing her eyes, her dark curls wild from sleep. Her pink pajamas rumpled. "I'm hungry." The tension in the room dissolved instantly as both our attention shifted to our daughter. Dominic's expression softened, the hard lines of anger melting away. "Good morning, Princess," he said gently. "I was just inviting you and your mother to have breakfast with me in the garden. Would you like that?" Amelia nodded enthusiastically, seemingly unsurprised to find Dominic in our quarters so early in the morning. "Can I have pancakes? Mrs. Reynolds makes really good ones." "Anything you want," Dominic promised. "Why don't you go get dressed? I'll wait here with your mother." Once Amelia had disappeared back into the bedroom, Dominic turned to me with determined calm. "A truce," he proposed quietly. "For today, for her sake, can we just be? No arguments, no past, no future. Just breakfast with our daughter, put like that. It was hard to refuse." "A truce," I agreed reluctantly. "But this doesn't resolve anything. One day at a time, Sophie." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's all I'm asking for right now." Breakfast in the garden terrace was surreal in its normalcy. Amelia, delighted by the novelty of dining outdoors, chattered happily about the butterflies visiting the nearby flowers. Dominic listened to her every word with rapt attention, asking questions that drew her out, learning about his daughter with the focus he typically reserved for business matters. I watched their interaction with mixed emotions. The ease with which he slipped into the role of doting father was both heartwarming and alarming. Amelia was already becoming attached, evident in the way she looked to him for approval, the way she giggled at his jokes, the way she corrected his pronunciation of certain words with the imperious confidence of a 4-year-old. "Mr. Dom, do you have to work today?" she asked, as she pushed a piece of pancake around her plate, drawing patterns in the syrup. "I'm afraid so, Princess," he replied, his expression genuinely regretful. "But not until this afternoon. Until then, I'm all yours." "Can we go swimming?" You said you have a pool. Dominic glanced at me, silently seeking permission. I hesitated, then nodded slightly. Denying Amelia simple pleasures out of spite would only hurt her. I think that can be arranged, he said, returning his attention to Amelia. Do you have a swimsuit? She shook her head sadly. We don't go swimming very much. Well, that's easily fixed. He pulled out his phone, tapped out a message, then returned it to his pocket. By the time we finish breakfast, there will be several swimsuits for you to choose from. Amelia's eyes widened with delight. Really? Like magic? Better than magic, he replied with a wink. Efficient staff and express delivery. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to comment on the casual display of wealth and privilege. This was the world Dominic inhabited, a world where desires were fulfilled with a text message, where obstacles disappeared with the application of money and influence, a world that was now, by extension, Amelia's birthright. True to his word, when we returned to our rooms after breakfast, we found a selection of children's swimwear laid out on Amelia's bed, along with several options for me. The sight of the women's swimsuits, tasteful but undeniably expensive, made heat rise to my cheeks. The idea of Dominic selecting them, considering what would suit my figure. I like the mermaid one, Amelia declared, holding up a shimmering turquoise swimsuit with scale-like patterns. Can I wear this one, Mama? Of course, sweetheart, I replied, helping her change while studiously ignoring the options laid out for me. Once she was dressed, I pulled on a cover-up over my old one-piece swimsuit from the previous summer, faded but serviceable. A small act of defiance, perhaps petty, but necessary for my sense of autonomy. Dominic raised an eyebrow when he saw me, but made no comment. He'd changed into swim trunks and a fitted t-shirt that did little to disguise the muscular physique beneath. I forced my eyes away, focusing instead on Amelia's excitement as we made our way to the indoor pool complex. The pool turned out to be an Olympic-sized marvel housed in its own glass-enclosed pavilion, with a separate children's pool featuring gentle slopes and fountains. Amelia's squeal of delight echoed off the high ceilings as she took in the spectacle. Stay in the shallow area, I warned as she rushed toward the water's edge. You don't know how to swim yet. I've arranged for lessons, Dominic said quietly beside me. Starting tomorrow, if that's acceptable to you. The consideration in the request, asking rather than commanding, caught me off guard. Yes, that's fine, thank you. He nodded, his eyes on Amelia as she cautiously stepped into the water, her face a picture of concentration. She's fearless, he observed. Not fearless, I corrected. Determined, there's a difference. Like her mother, he murmured, a hint of admiration in his voice. I didn't respond, moving instead to join Amelia in the shallow water. She reached for me immediately, her little hands grasping mine as she grew accustomed to the sensation of floating. Watch me, Mama! Watch me! She called, splashing enthusiastically. I see you, baby, I assured her. You're doing great. From the corner of my eye, I saw Dominic remove his t-shirt and dive smoothly into the deeper end of the main pool. He surfaced several yards away, his powerful strokes carrying him the length of the pool and back. The display of athletic prowess was clearly for Amelia's benefit, her eyes wide with admiration as she watched her father swim. He's so fast, she exclaimed. Can I swim like that someday? With practice, I told her. Everyone has to start somewhere. Dominic emerged from the pool, water streaming down his torso, and made his way toward us. Would you like me to hold you in the water? He offered Amelia. So you can feel what it's like to float? She nodded eagerly, and after a questioning glance at me, he lifted her carefully, supporting her small body as she lay back in the water. Relax, he instructed gently. The water will hold you up if you don't fight it. Gradually, Amelia's rigid posture softened, her trust in Dominic's strong hands evident as she allowed herself to float. The sight of them together, father and daughter sharing this moment of connection, created a lump in my throat I couldn't swallow past. This was what I'd denied them both. This simple joy of parent and child discovering each other, learning together, building the bonds that should have formed from birth. Whatever my reasons, valid as they were, this was the cost. 4 years of moments like this, lost forever. Your turn, Dominic said, interrupting my thoughts. He'd settled Amelia on the pool steps where she could sit safely with the water at her waist. "Come to the deep end with me. I'm fine here," I replied, unwilling to leave Amelia, unwilling to follow him into deeper waters. Literally and metaphorically. "She's safe," he assured me, correctly interpreting my hesitation. "And you look like you could use a proper swim. You're wound so tight you might snap." Before I could protest further, he added, 5 minutes. Just to the other end and back. I'll race you." The challenge in his eyes, playful rather than demanding, reminded me of the Dominic I'd first met, the man who'd charmed me with his competitive spirit and unexpected flashes of humor. "Fine," I conceded, turning to Amelia. "Stay right there on the steps, okay? Mama's just going to swim to the other side with your father. Don't move." "I'll watch the fishies," she promised, pointing to the colorful mosaic sea creatures that decorated the pool floor. Dominic led me to the edge of the main pool. "Ready?" he asked, a hint of that old playfulness in his eyes. "I haven't exactly had time for recreational swimming these past few years," I warned him. "Don't expect much. Just swim, Sophie," he said quietly. "Stop thinking for 5 minutes. Just be in your body." Without waiting for my response, he dove in, and after a moment's hesitation, I followed. The cool water enveloped me, washing away the tension of the past 24 hours. I found my rhythm quickly, muscle memory from years of competitive swimming in high school returning with each stroke. Dominic pulled ahead easily, his longer reach and greater strength giving him an advantage, but I pushed myself harder, focusing on form rather than speed. We reached the far wall almost simultaneously, and as we turned to head back, he flashed me a genuine smile. Open, unguarded, reminiscent of the man I'd once believed him to be. For those few minutes, suspended in the water, I allowed myself to forget the complications between us. I was simply a woman swimming, enjoying the stretch and pull of muscles, the controlled rhythm of breath, the cool caress of water against skin. By the time we touched the wall on our return, I felt lighter somehow. A fraction of my burden temporarily lifted. "You're still good," Dominic observed as we both caught our breath. "You used to swim in college, didn't you?" "High school," I corrected, surprised he remembered that detail from our early conversations. "Just local competitions, nothing serious." "You should have pursued it," he said, brushing wet hair back from his face. "You have natural talent." "Life had other plans," I replied, glancing toward Amelia, who waved cheerfully from her perch on the steps. "Life or me?" he asked quietly. Before I could answer, a discreet cough drew our attention to the pool entrance, where one of Dominic's security team stood waiting. "Mr. Blackwood, your associates have arrived early for the meeting." "They're waiting in your office." Dominic's expression shifted instantly, the relaxed openness vanishing behind a mask of professional detachment. "Tell them I'll be with them in 15 minutes. The man nodded and withdrew. Dominic turned back to me. His demeanor changed, once again the powerful businessman rather than the playful swimming partner. "I need to go," he said, regret evident in his voice. "Business that can't wait." "Of course," I replied neutrally. "Amelia and I will be fine." He hauled himself out of the pool in one fluid motion, then offered me his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I accepted it, allowing him to pull me from the water. His grip lingered a moment longer than necessary, his eyes searching mine. "Tonight," he said suddenly. "Dinner. Just the 3 of us. 7 o'clock in the private dining room." It wasn't quite a question, but neither was it the outright command of the previous evening. Progress, of a sort. "We'll be there," I agreed, pulling my hand from his grasp. "Now go. Your associates are waiting." A shadow crossed his face at my deliberate choice of words. "You're never going to let it go, are you? What you saw that night. Would you? If our positions were reversed?" He considered this seriously, then shook his head. "No, I wouldn't. But I would listen if you tried to explain." With that parting shot, he grabbed a towel from a nearby rack, dried himself briskly, and departed. I rejoined Amelia in the children's pool, pushing thoughts of Dominic and his associates from my mind. For the next hour, I focused entirely on my daughter. Her joy in the water, her growing confidence, her infectious laughter as she discovered the simple pleasure of splashing. By the time we returned to our rooms, Amelia was happily exhausted, ready for lunch and her afternoon nap. Mrs. Reynolds appeared as if by magic, with a tray of sandwiches and fruit, her manner considerably warmer than it had been when I was merely the housekeeper. "Mr. Blackwood asked me to inform you that he's been delayed," she said, as she arranged the food on the small table by the window. "He sends his apologies and looks forward to seeing you both at dinner." "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds," I replied, helping Amelia into dry clothes. Is there somewhere I can go while Amelia naps? Somewhere quiet to think?" The older woman's expression softened with understanding. "The library is usually empty at this time of day. Second floor, east wing. I can show you the way after lunch if you'd like." "That would be wonderful. Thank you." Once Amelia was fed and settled for her nap, Mrs. Reynolds guided me through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors to a set of double doors. "The library," she announced, pushing one door open to reveal a 2-story room lined with bookshelves, comfortable seating areas scattered throughout the space like islands in a sea of knowledge. "It's beautiful," I breathed, taking in the sunlight streaming through tall windows, the rich scent of leather and paper, the hushed atmosphere of accumulated wisdom. Mr. Blackwood spent a fortune renovating it when he purchased the estate, Mrs. Reynolds informed me with evident pride. Most of the previous owner's collection was military history, dreadfully dry stuff. Mr. Blackwood expanded it considerably. I moved further into the room, drawn to a section of art history texts, my former field of study. Running my fingers along the spines, I recognized titles I'd once pored over in university libraries, editions I'd coveted but could never afford. "You'll be undisturbed here," Mrs. Reynolds assured me. "The staff knows this is one of Mr. Blackwood's private spaces." After she departed, I selected a volume on Renaissance painting techniques and settled into a window seat that overlooked the back gardens. But the familiar text couldn't hold my attention. My mind kept returning to Dominic, to the glimpses of the man I'd once known that occasionally broke through his controlled exterior. Was he playing me again? Creating these moments of connection, these reminders of our past relationship, as part of some strategy to bind me to him? Or were they genuine? The real Dominic emerging despite his determination to maintain control, and which was more dangerous to my resolve to keep emotional distance between us. Hours later, as I prepared Amelia for dinner, these questions still circled in my mind. She twirled in the new dress that had mysteriously appeared in her closet while we were at the pool, a simple but beautiful blue cotton frock with a satin sash. "Do I look pretty, Mama?" she asked, executing another wobbly spin. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I assured her, brushing her freshly washed curls. "Hold still now. Let me tie the ribbon." As I secured the sash in a bow, I caught our reflection in the full-length mirror, Amelia beaming with childish delight, me behind her in a simple black dress I'd found among the new clothes I'd finally consented to wear. We looked like strangers in this elegant setting, play-acting at a life that wasn't ours. And yet, Amelia adapted with the resilience of childhood, already treating this mansion as an extension of her world, accepting its luxuries without question. How quickly she'd embraced Dominic, too, the father who'd materialized overnight in her life, offering her everything I'd never been able to provide. A knock at the door signaled our escort. Rather than security, however, it was Dominic himself who stood in the hallway, his tall frame now clothed in casual elegance. Dark trousers, and a light blue button-down shirt that matched Amelia's dress so perfectly it couldn't be coincidence. "My ladies," he said with a slight bow that made Amelia giggle, "you both look lovely this evening. Thank you for the dress," I said quietly, as Amelia skipped ahead of us down the corridor. "It wasn't necessary. It pleased me to give it," he replied simply, "and it clearly pleases her to wear it." I couldn't argue with that. Amelia had been delighted by the gift, spinning in front of the mirror for a full 5 minutes before I could convince her to sit still for hairbrushing. The private dining room was smaller than the formal one we'd used the previous night, cozier, with a round table that created a sense of intimacy. The table was set with fine china, but lacked the intimidating array of silverware from the night before. A child's booster seat had been placed at one setting. "I had the chef prepare something special," Dominic informed us as he held my chair. "Nothing too fancy, but I think you'll both enjoy it." The meal that followed was surprisingly casual. Gourmet versions of child-friendly foods, served family-style in the center of the table. Amelia's eyes widened at the chicken tenders that looked nothing like the frozen ones I occasionally bought, the homemade macaroni and cheese garnished with fresh herbs, the roasted vegetables arranged in a colorful pattern. "This is the best dinner ever," she declared after her first bite of macaroni, her expression so serious that both Dominic and I laughed. The sound of our shared amusement hung in the air between us, a brief moment of genuine connection that caught us both by surprise. For the next hour, we maintained the truce he'd proposed that morning, focusing on Amelia, rather than the unresolved tension between us. Dominic drew her out with questions about her favorite books, her imaginary friends, her opinions on everything from butterflies to the proper way to build a blanket fort. I watched them interact, struck by how naturally they'd fallen into a relationship, how much of him I could see in her, not just physically, but in her mannerisms, her quick wit, her quiet determination. And then the dragon said, "I don't want to burn the village, but they won't let me play with them," Amelia was explaining earnestly, recounting the plot of a story she'd invented. "So the princess took him to her castle instead, and they had ice cream." "A wise princess," Dominic observed solemnly. "Sometimes all a dragon needs is a friend." "Dragons need families too," Amelia informed him. "Even scary ones." His eyes met mine over her head, the message clear. Even men like me need families. Even monsters can love. After dinner, as the hour grew late, Amelia's eyelids began to droop, despite her determination to stay awake. "I think it's someone's bedtime," I said gently. "Not tired," she protested, around a yawn that contradicted her claim. "Tell you what," Dominic suggested. "How about I tell you a story while your mother gets your bath ready? Would you like that?" Amelia nodded eagerly, apparently forgetting her earlier protest about not being tired. I hesitated, irrationally reluctant to leave them alone together, then silently chided myself. Whatever else Dominic might be, he'd shown nothing but gentle care toward our daughter. "I'll just be in the next room," I said, rising from the table. "Don't get her too excited with your story, or she'll never sleep." His smile was knowing. "I think I can manage bedtime duties, Sophie." In the bathroom, I ran warm water for Amelia's bath, adding bubbles from the collection of child-friendly toiletries that had appeared in our suite. Through the open door, I could hear Dominic's deep voice weaving a tale about a princess who saved herself from a tower, his tone shifting dramatically with each character. By the time the bath was ready, Amelia was curled against his side on the sofa, utterly enthralled by the story. "Bath time, sweetheart," I called softly. "Can Daddy finish the story after my bath?" she asked, the word Daddy falling from her lips with such natural ease that it stopped me in my tracks. Dominic's expression, a mixture of surprise, joy, and fierce possessiveness, nearly broke my heart. "Of course I can, Princess," he assured her, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll wait right here." I hurried Amelia through her bath routine, helping her into pajamas and brushing her teeth, all while my mind raced with implications. In just 2 days, she'd not only accepted Dominic as her father, but had given him the title, that sacred word that children bestow with such innocent trust. There was no going back now, no undoing this connection that had formed with such breathtaking speed. When we returned to the sitting room, Dominic was exactly where we'd left him, his expression composed once more, though something vulnerable lingered in his eyes. Amelia climbed immediately onto the sofa beside him, tucking herself against his side, as if she'd been doing so her entire life. "Where were we?" he asked, his arm curling protectively around her small shoulders. "The princess was climbing down the tower on a rope made of bedsheets," Amelia prompted. "Ah, yes," Dominic continued, resuming the tale of the resourceful princess who rescued herself, then helped the dragon who'd been guarding her tower find his own family. I sat in a nearby chair, watching them together, a lump forming in my throat. This moment of perfect connection between father and daughter was both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful for its authenticity, terrifying for how completely it tied us to Dominic. Amelia would never again be content without her father in her life, and where she went, I went too. By the time the story concluded, Amelia was barely awake, her eyes fluttering closed despite her efforts to stay conscious. Time for bed, little one, I said gently. Can Daddy carry me? She murmured sleepily. Again, that word, Daddy. Dominic's eyes met mine over her head, seeking permission. I nodded slightly, and he lifted her with careful tenderness, following me to her bedroom. Good night, princess, he whispered, as he laid her gently on her bed. Sweet dreams. Night, Daddy, she replied, already more asleep than awake. Love you. The simple declaration hit Dominic like a physical blow. I saw him stiffen, saw the emotion that washed over his face before he controlled it. I love you too, he replied, his voice barely audible. We slipped from the room together, leaving the door slightly ajar. In the sitting room, Dominic stood motionless, his back to me, his shoulders rigid with tension. She's never said that to anyone but me, I said quietly, not even to my mother before she passed. He turned slowly to face me. Thank you, he said simply, for raising her to be capable of such love, for keeping her safe all these years. The gratitude in his voice was genuine, lacking the bitter edge that had colored our previous exchanges about Amelia's upbringing. Something had shifted between us, the beginning of understanding, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement of our shared priority, our daughter's well-being. She's easy to love, I replied, moving to the window, needing distance from the raw emotion emanating from him. She always has been, like her mother. The words were so soft I almost missed them. I turned back to him, unsure how to respond. The air between us felt charged, weighted with unspoken history, with questions unanswered and truths half revealed. We need to talk, Dominic, I said finally. Really talk. About the past, about what happens now. He nodded, crossing to the sideboard where a decanter of amber liquid sat beside crystal glasses. Drink? No, thank you. I needed a clear head for this conversation. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey but didn't drink immediately, instead cradling the glass in his palm as he took a seat in one of the armchairs. After a moment's hesitation, I took the chair opposite him. The night you saw what you saw, he began without preamble. That man, Vasily Petrov, was a trafficker. He'd broken an agreement with me, used my shipping containers to move girls instead of the electronics he'd claimed. 14 of them, Sophie. The youngest was 12. I swallowed hard, the horror of such trafficking momentarily overshadowing my judgment of Dominic's methods. What happened to them? The girls? I got them out. Got them medical care, documentation, safe houses. He took a sip of his whiskey. Some were returned to their families. Others, whose families had sold them in the first place, were placed with vetted foster homes. And Petrov? Dominic's expression hardened. He never trafficked anyone again. The implication was clear, but I found I couldn't summon the moral outrage I might once have felt. Some crimes perhaps deserved extrajudicial punishment, though I wasn't comfortable being the one to decide which ones. Not every man I've dealt with has been guilty of such crimes, Dominic continued, his voice neutral. Business is business, and sometimes business gets messy, but there are lines I don't cross, Sophie. Lines I've never crossed. What lines? I asked quietly. I don't deal in human trafficking. I don't deal in drugs that kill, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl. I don't kill innocent people. He met my gaze directly. I'm not claiming to be a good man by conventional standards, but I have a code. I protect what's mine. I keep my word. And I make sure the punishment fits the crime. I considered his words carefully. And that justifies everything? Your code absolves you of responsibility for the things you do outside it? No, he replied, surprising me with his candor. It doesn't absolve me of anything, but it lets me sleep at night, which is more than many in my position can say. What exactly is your position, Dominic? I asked directly. What do you call what you do? A slight smile curved his lips. Officially? I'm a businessman with diverse interests. Shipping, real estate, private security, hospitality. And unofficially? Unofficially, I maintain order in a world that operates outside conventional law. I enforce agreements that can't be enforced in courts. I protect territories and interests that exist in gray areas. His expression turned serious. But none of that touches our daughter, Sophie. None of it ever will. How can you promise that? I pressed. How can you compartmentalize your life so neatly? Because I've been doing it my entire adult life. He set his glass down, leaning forward. My father built this empire, such as it is. He ruled through fear alone, brutal, unyielding fear. When I took over after his death, I changed things. Modernized operations, legitimized what could be legitimized, created walls between the different aspects of the business. Your father, I echoed, recalling Elena's veiled references to their childhood. What was he like? Dominic's expression darkened. A monster, he said simply. Not the kind of fairy tale dragon that can be tamed with kindness, a true monster who enjoyed causing pain, who saw love as weakness, who thought children existed to continue his legacy and nothing more. The blunt assessment sent a chill through me. And yet you followed in his footsteps. I took his position, Dominic corrected. I dismantled his methods. I became what I needed to become to survive in his world while changing what I could. His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. And I swore that if I ever had children, they would never know the fear that defined my childhood. They would never doubt they were loved, never wonder if they were safe in their own home. The passion in his voice, the raw honesty of his declaration, caught me off guard. Is that why you reacted so strongly when you found out about Amelia? Because you felt I denied you the chance to be a different kind of father than yours was? Partly, he acknowledged. But mostly because she's mine, Sophie. My blood, my responsibility, my legacy. Not the legacy my father tried to force on me, but something better, something I choose to build. And what about me? I asked quietly. Where do I fit in this legacy you're building? He stood, moving to kneel before my chair, his hands resting lightly on the armrests, caging but not touching me. You're the mother of my child, he said, his voice low and intense. You're the woman who's haunted me for 5 years, the only woman who's ever walked away from me, the only woman who's ever given me something I can't buy, can't take, can't demand. Amelia, I whispered, and yourself, he added, one hand lifting to hover near my face, not quite touching. Your heart, your trust. Things I had once and lost. You never had my trust, I countered. Not really. I didn't know who you were. You knew parts of me, he insisted. The parts that mattered, the parts that loved you, that would have done anything to keep you happy and safe. But there were other parts you kept hidden. Yes, he admitted, and I would have told you eventually when I thought you were ready, but you discovered the truth before I could prepare you for it. I searched his face, looking for deception, finding only intensity and something that might have been regret. And now? What do you want from me now, Dominic? Everything, he said simply, but I'll settle for a chance. A chance to be Amelia's father, a chance to show you who I've become. A chance to earn back what we lost. And if I say no, if all I'm willing to give you is co-parenting, nothing more? His jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll have. I meant what I said, Sophie. I won't force anything on you, but I won't stop hoping either. The sincerity in his voice, the restraint in his posture despite the desire clearly written in his eyes, touched something in me I'd thought long buried. I can't make any promises, I said finally. Not yet. There's too much history, too many complications. I'm not asking for promises, he replied. Just time. Time for us to find our way forward, whatever that may be. His hand finally made contact, fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with exquisite gentleness. Can you give me that much? Before I could answer, a piercing scream shattered the moment. Amelia, I gasped, already moving toward her bedroom door. Dominic was faster, bursting into the room ahead of me, his body instinctively positioning itself between potential threat and his family. But there was no intruder, only Amelia, thrashing in her bed, caught in the throes of a nightmare. Mama! She cried, her eyes wide but unseeing. Mama! The bad men are coming. I'm here, baby, I soothed, gathering her into my arms. It's just a dream. There are no bad men. Her small body shuddered against mine, tears streaming down her cheeks. They were taking you away, she sobbed. They were taking you, and Daddy couldn't find us. Dominic's expression tightened at her words. He sat on the edge of the bed, close but not interfering with my attempts to comfort her. No one is taking your mama anywhere, he assured her, his voice gentle but with an undercurrent of steel. And I will always, always find you both, no matter what. Amelia's tear-streaked face turned toward him. Promise, she demanded with the absolute authority of childhood. I promise, he vowed, with such solemnity that even I believed him. Now, how about I check under the bed and in the closet, just to make sure no bad men are hiding? She nodded, her arms still locked around my neck as Dominic made a show of checking every possible hiding place in the room. All clear, he reported. No bad men anywhere. Can you stay? She asked in a small voice. Both of you? Just until I fall asleep again? Dominic looked to me, waiting for my lead. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded, shifting to one side of the bed while keeping an arm around Amelia. We'll both stay, sweetheart. Just close your eyes. Dominic settled on Amelia's other side, the three of us forming a protective cocoon around our daughter. She snuggled between us, her breathing gradually slowing as she drifted back toward sleep, secure in the knowledge that both her parents were watching over her. She's never had nightmares about bad men before, I whispered once she was asleep, careful not to wake her. Children pick up on more than we realize, Dominic replied equally quietly. The tension between us, the sudden change in her circumstances. She's processing it in her own way. Or she's sensing something real, I countered. The danger that surrounds you, that now surrounds us, because of our connection to you. His expression hardened. No harm will come to either of you, he stated with absolute conviction. I've increased security since you arrived. My most trusted men are watching the property day and night. That's not as reassuring as you think it is, I said dryly. The fact that we need protection at all proves my point. Everyone needs protection, Sophie, he replied. The difference is, you have it now. The best protection money can buy, and more importantly, the protection of my name, my reputation. Your reputation is what? Someone who hurts people who cross him? Precisely. His smile held no humor. Fear is an effective deterrent. I looked down at Amelia, peacefully asleep between us, her dark lashes resting against her cheeks, her small hand curled trustingly around my finger. I never wanted this life for her, I whispered, for us. What life did you want? He asked, his voice softened by genuine curiosity. A normal one, I replied. A life where we didn't have to look over our shoulders, where we didn't need armed guards, where her father was, just a father. I can never be just a father, Dominic said with brutal honesty. But I can be a good one. I can give her everything she needs. Safety, opportunity, love. His eyes met mine across our sleeping daughter. I can give you those things too, if you'll let me. I don't know if I can, I admitted. I don't know if I can reconcile the man who tells her bedtime stories with the man who orders punishments for those who break his rules. You don't have to, he replied simply. Those parts of my life will never touch her. Or you. All I ask is that you give us a chance to be a family, in whatever way works for us. Family. The word hung between us, laden with meaning, with promise and peril in equal measure. Looking at Amelia, at the perfect peace on her face as she slept between her parents, I knew I couldn't deny her the chance to know her father. The question was, could I open myself to knowing him again as well? As if reading my thoughts, Dominic reached across Amelia, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining with gentle pressure. One day at a time, he murmured. That's all I'm asking. I should have pulled away. I should have maintained the boundaries I'd been trying to establish since he'd discovered us. Instead, I found myself returning the pressure of his fingers, accepting the connection, however tentative. One day at a time, I agreed softly. 6 months later, I stood at the window of what was now truly our suite, watching Amelia splash in the outdoor pool under the watchful eye of her swimming instructor. In half a year, she'd progressed from fearful beginner to confident swimmer, her natural athleticism, inherited from both her parents, evident in her smooth strokes. She's getting good, Dominic observed, coming to stand beside me. The instructor says she has potential for competition if she wants it. Let's not push her, I cautioned. She's only 5. No pushing, he agreed, his arm slipping around my waist with casual intimacy, just opportunities when she's ready. I leaned into him slightly, accepting the contact that had once seemed impossible. 6 months of careful negotiation, of boundaries gradually softening, of trust slowly rebuilt through consistent actions rather than empty promises. We weren't where we had been 5 years ago. Perhaps we never would be, but we'd found a new equilibrium. A way to coexist as parents first, as something more second. Dominic had kept his word, his business, the darker aspects of it, never touched our daily life. He maintained the walls between his worlds with meticulous care, never bringing work home, never discussing certain matters where Amelia or I might overhear. The security remained, discreet but ever-present, a constant reminder of the reality we lived in, but one I'd learned to accept. For Amelia's sake, I'd stayed. For my own sake, I'd maintained certain boundaries, my own bank account, my decision to return to university to complete my degree, my insistence on making some decisions for Amelia without deferring to Dominic's preferences. To my surprise, he'd respected these boundaries, supporting my education, encouraging my independence, even as he made clear his desire for a deeper connection. And somewhere along the way, watching him with Amelia, his infinite patience, his fierce protectiveness, his genuine joy in her accomplishments, I'd begun to see past the man who'd frightened me 5 years ago to the father he'd become, to the partner he could be. "Penny for your thoughts?" Dominic asked, breaking into my reverie. I turned to face him, studying the face that had become so familiar again. The strong jaw, the intense blue eyes, the rare smile that transformed his features when Amelia coaxed it from him. "I was thinking about how far we've come," I admitted. "How different things are from what I expected when you found us. Better or worse?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath the casual question. "Different," I repeated. "Better in some ways, more complicated in others." I reached up to touch his face, a gesture that had once been impossible to imagine. "But I'm glad Amelia has her father. And I'm glad we found our way back to each other, even if it's not the same as before." His hand covered mine, pressing my palm more firmly against his cheek. "It's better than before," he said quietly. "Before, we had secrets between us. Now we have truth. Not all truths, perhaps." There were still aspects of his business I preferred not to know about, details of his past he kept to himself. But the essential truths, who he was, what mattered to him, how far he would go to protect what he considered his, those lay bare between us now. "I never stopped loving you," he confessed, his voice low and intense, "even when I thought you'd betrayed me, even when I was angry enough to tear the world apart looking for you. I never stopped." The declaration hung in the air between us, neither a question nor a demand, simply a truth offered without expectation. 6 months ago, it would have terrified me. Now, it settled somewhere deep inside, a missing piece clicking into place. "I tried to stop loving you," I replied honestly. I told myself I'd imagined the good parts, that the man I'd fallen for was just a facade. But every time I looked at Amelia, I saw you, not just in her features, but in her spirit. In her determination, her curiosity, her fierce loyalty. His arms tightened around me, drawing me closer. "And now?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "What do you feel now?" I considered the question seriously, weighing the journey we'd taken, from lovers to strangers to cautious co-parents to this, whatever this was becoming. "I feel like I'm finally seeing all of you," I said softly. "The good and the bad, the gentle father and the ruthless businessman, the man who reads bedtime stories and the man who protects what's his at any cost, and I'm starting to understand that they're all parts of the same whole." "And you can accept that? All of me?" The question was weighted with months of restraint, of careful progress, of bridges slowly rebuilt between us. I thought of Amelia, sleeping peacefully each night, secure in the knowledge that both her parents loved her, that her family, unconventional as it might be, was intact. I thought of the man before me who had given me space and time, who had proven his promises through actions rather than words, who had shown me every day that whatever else he might be, he was a good father to our daughter. Yes, I said finally, the word both an ending and a beginning. I can accept all of you. I do. The tension drained from his body, his forehead coming to rest against mine in a gesture of profound relief. I've waited 5 years to hear you say that, he murmured. I've spent 5 years learning who I am without you, I replied. Now, I'm ready to discover who I can be with you. Not the girl I was then, but the woman, the mother I've become. His lips found mine, gentle at first, then with growing intensity. 5 years of separation, of longing, of rediscovery channeled into a kiss that promised everything words couldn't express. When we finally parted, both breathless, his smile held a warmth reserved solely for me and Amelia. Mama, Daddy, watch me dive. Amelia's voice called from the pool below, breaking the moment. We turned together to the window, watching as our daughter executed a somewhat wobbly dive into the deep end, emerging with a triumphant grin. Dominic's arm remained around my waist, my head finding the perfect resting place against his shoulder. A family united by love that had survived secrets, separation, and the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding trust. She's fearless, Dominic observed proudly. Not fearless, I corrected with a smile. Brave. There's a difference. Like her mother, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. Like both her parents, I amended. It took courage for you to let us set the pace, to wait, to prove yourself through actions rather than demands. He shrugged, but I felt the pleasure my acknowledgement gave him. For you and Amelia, I would wait forever. As we stood together, watching our daughter shine in the sunlight, I knew with bone-deep certainty that we had found our way home. Not to the past we'd lost, but to a future we were building together, day by day, on foundations of truth and trust that no storm could shake. The Mafia boss's housekeeper and their secret child had become something else entirely. A family, unconventional but unbreakable, bound by love stronger than fear, stronger than the past, stronger than the dangers that might still lie ahead. And in that moment, watching Amelia wave to us with pure joy, I knew I wouldn't have it any other way.